Sorry, I don't understand.
Okay. I think we're live now, and exciting to be here. I'm a couple of minutes early, so we have to wait, Johnny. I think the gates open at 2 p.m. sharp.
Okay.
So I just filling some time here on what's going on with the world. Um,
Well, there's only one thing going on, that's deep seek, as far as I'm concerned. All the
Yeah,
rest is just
I'm
potato chips.
really I'm really amazed with the impact of that and how the numbers are incredibly daunting. You know, one 10,000th of the cost. 6 million bucks versus several billion for DeepSeek versus ChatGPT and other platforms. It's just
And
kind of
even if they took it
cool.
from OpenAI, somebody missed it. They were going to spend billions to bring it
Yeah.
up to speed, and they did it with 6 million.
Well, that's the thing, right? And so the administration made an announcement with Oracle and SoftBank and OpenAI that the government was going to, coalesce an investment of $500 billion into AI. And now the question is, do we need that much money on that? So,
Yeah.
so it's a very interesting time what's going on with the innovation. But more importantly, I'm really curious when we get into it later about social media. And I have a feeling, John, that while we are still, techno geeks and connected to the world, we really don't have a sense for what's going on in TikTok or Instagram or, the whole. I think I see and I peruse occasionally, and I'm not a fervent follower, but I see, big brands and people branding themselves and doing big stuff there. And it seems like the world is shifting, and obviously our guests will
Yeah,
have
we talk about
probably
that.
a lot
Yeah.
to say about that. But I think we're live now. I see that we have a bunch of guests joining in. So welcome everybody. Digital Roundtable is on today. It is a incredibly foggy day in Austin or in Central Texas altogether. It feels like we are on an early summer day in West Palm Beach, or I'm sorry, on a Pebble Beach, where it's incredibly foggy. And when you go play golf there, Johnny, I don't know if you've done it, but you hit the ball and you don't know where the flag is, and you just trust that you're hitting the ball to the right place, and then you walk,
Absolutely.
and then eventually you see, oh my God, the ball's right there.
Oh, there it is.
So,
As an AGC member, Austin Golf Club, I don't travel much to great golf courses. I got one right here in Austin.
so anyway, it's lots to talk about today between DeepSeek and the administration making all kinds of changes and what their reaction in the market in Silicon Valley, what's happening. But before we get going today and talk about branding and all those things, let's have our own John Sibley Butler play some intro music.
Riding on the city of New Orleans, Illinois Central, Monday morning rail. 15 cars and 15 restless passengers, 3 conductors and 25 sacks of mail. All along this southbound Odyssey, the train pulls out of Kankakee, and the rumbus pass houses, towns, and fields, passing towns that have no name, freight yards full of old black men, and of the rusted automobiles.
All right. Thank you, Johnny.
How you doing
Always,
today?
always a pleasure, John Butler. So tell us, Johnny, what are your thoughts about DeepSeek and what's going on, the impact of that? The market is taking it in the nose. So,
Well, let me put it in context. Of course, I was a professor at the University of Beijing for 2 summers there. And when I left there, it was a different China, a different country. That is, when I turned on my computer, it was an American company. That was Microsoft. When I used my apps, it was American app companies, right? And there were a lot of billwicks there that we rode around in. And what DeepSeek tells me is two things. That China is breaking the bond with America when it comes to technology. That is right now, when you turn on your computer in China, it would be a Chinese company that comes up. It would not be Microsoft. When you look at your apps in China, it would not be American apps. It would be Chinese. And when you drive your electric car, it would not be American. It would be Chinese. What DeepSeek does, the other thing is it shows the connectivity of the digital world when it comes to the financial sector. It tells us how people see the digital world going forward in terms of their participation, in terms of the new technology, and all of a sudden, nobody is copying anymore, but everyone is doing their own thing, especially China. There's no doubt in my world that OpenAI will come and say that the inspiration for DeepSeek was OpenAI. There's no doubt. People are going to say that they copied. They took a concept, and to me, as a statistician myself, it's all algorithms, it's all statistics to me. But they took a concept of AI and developed it with 6 million. And if you can remember, when the president took office, he announced it would be billions dedicated to this kind of endeavor.
Yep.
So DeepSeek did it with 6 million. So it just tells you that when you're dealing with statistics, when you're dealing with the movement of equations, you can take shortcuts. You can do the Markov equations differently. You can do the regressions differently. You can do the analogs different. You can do the digital differently. So that's what they did. But I can tell you this, because what happens now as China is coming rapidly, as measured by DeepSeek, and not just other things that we're talking about, that would be, we would go after China as a, quote, declining sort of, when it comes to gross national products and et cetera. And we know, as I've said before, China rose 1 billion people out of poverty in one generation. It's taken the West almost 300 years to do it. It comes at a time when we have a new president in office to take this great country forward, who's more of a nationalist. In other words, more of a nationalist, America first, return manufacturing to America. And of course, you know, there are a lot of emphasis with nationalism as opposed to globalism, right? So we're sort of at a crossroad that asks, what are we going to do with the global traditions that we have? And when I say that, we know that in the 1980s, for example, we gave all of our economy to China. We went cheap, and we put the land, as we put labor over there. And then, so globalism is very, very interesting. But when you do that, the question is, can you raise tariffs? Because everything, inflation goes higher. What do we really manufacture in America? And as a scholar, the big theoretical question is, does China need the West anymore? So I think all of these come at a time where President Trump is going to have to take them on. And I think that since he is a transaction president, I mean, he likes to make a deal, is what I'm saying, that it would be interesting, very, very interesting to watch. But when it comes to the end, and you think about where we are, I think our orientation needs to change in a number of ways. What will make us go forward is minerals, right? And if you go back, I'm gonna get very academic without without charging tuition. But if you really go back to how we used to think about the idea of thought, or the economy of thoughts, rather than economics, but the history of thought, well, the physiocrats had it right in the 1500s. and they said that the most important thing is what comes from the soil and what comes from the earth and the sun. And that would be minerals, that would be food. So the earth starts. Well, of course, Adam Smith came along and said, no, what comes from the most important thing is labor. So our notion of economics might have to change because what we're saying is with all the minerals that we need going forward. So we might have to rethink. I've always rethought it. My father told me it was the land. Of course, he had degrees in agriculture, but he always told me that it was the land. So Andreas, I think that what we got to do is make sure that America remains a place where we can have equal opportunity. And I think that the president tried to deal with DEI, which is different in scope than equal opportunity. I think all of those things have got to get out the way fast. And then we got to get back to doing business. We got to look at the reputations. Oh, look at here. We got to look at the reputations of our enterprises. When I turn on my computer, I've got to say, hey, Microsoft has a great reputation. Because I'll have a choice between, hey, you know, DeepSeek, right, from China and other kinds. And we know that we have really kept the automobiles from China out of America. And in 6 years, they created the most reliable, good-looking electric cars that we have. But we went with Elon Musk and gave him all kinds of advantages for him to be successful in the Western Hemisphere. That's kind of where we are. It's very exciting times. I'm really looking at how people respond to this president. You know, it's kind of like people say, well, the president has done X, Y, and Z. And I said, wait a minute now, we don't live in a dictatorship. Here come the courts. You know, we have checks and balances, right? So as a scholar, I like listening to that as political scientists try to deal with it. But we got to get back to the importance of seeing a future in America and making America a place where there's equal opportunity and a great place for jobs and opportunity.
Interesting.
I took Llewellyn's time this morning too, if you didn't notice.
Right. So, let me introduce our guest, Bonnie Caver. Bonnie is the founder and CEO of Reputation Lighthouse, and she's going to be with us for the hour. And Reputation Lighthouse is a 20-year-old organization focused on helping companies create, accelerate, and protect their corporate values. And I think that the interesting thing about that, and Bonnie can start chiming in on what's going on as it relates to the impact of that and the goodwill of a brand and social media. And, we were talking earlier, Johnny, that I have a feeling that this whole notion of the influencer, which is an individual brand versus a corporate brand, is kind of shifting things in an incredible way. And one individual now has an incredible amount of power in certain issues. And so anyway, the digitalization of the planet continues to create new business models, new opportunities. And so welcome, Bonnie, to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. Bonnie, tell us a little bit about you and your company and maybe some of the things that you're working on and how some of our thinking applies to what you're dealing with and helping your clients every day.
So I started my career, I won't say how long ago, but started in college athletics as a media relations PR professional, did a lot of crisis communications. And then I worked for a period of time at Special Olympics Texas. At the time, Special Olympics was the largest Special Olympics in Texas, was the largest in the world. And as we've been talking about China, that was a transition that was happening when I was at Special Olympics, as we were looking at China and Africa and the growth of how they treated people with intellectual disabilities and the opportunities that were there. And so there's been a huge growth there in the things they're doing. And now those are the largest chapters in the world for Special Olympics. and it's been a real advocate for people with intellectual disabilities to change there. But over time of working in crisis, I realized that there was a huge opportunity for organizations to take all these communications and marketing strategies that we were using and put them towards reputation and building a corporate reputation. And when we did that, we created a value that was hard to replicate, because it was all around trust, and it was around how you're going to buy, where you're going to go to work, where you're going to invest. You're doing those things because of a trust in an organization that you're going to get value out of that. And so we started to put in reputational plans for organizations and help them protect through risk assessments and reputation assessments, crisis, et cetera, to see how you can actually create what we call the ultimate differentiator, and that's your reputation as an organization. And so what we're doing now is we're looking at all the things that are reputational risk to organizations, and we've got a lot of them going on right now. AI is a huge opportunity, but it's also a risk. Change in administration is a huge opportunity, but a huge risk. The environment, if you're doubling down on DE&I and all of a sudden we're not in a world where DE&I is accepted, that's a risk. If you're doing corporate activism, that's a risk. So there's so many opportunities for organizations to build trust, but there's a lot of things that we're doing out there today that are eroding that trust. And so we're trying to help organizations do a better job with that.
Yeah, yeah. I have lots of questions for you. Perhaps, it comes to mind one, which is Disney has been going through a lot of changes over the last 5 to 10 years. Why do you think some of these companies get in trouble all of a sudden and people start suing them? What is that tipping point? Because companies, you could argue, whatever, Walmart has always had issues with labor and pay and hours and what have you. And every successful company has some kind of backlash from anyone. But I keep thinking about Disney being this marvelous, phenomenal company, and then they got in trouble, and then they had to correct whatever they were doing wrong. And how does walk us through, what are your thoughts about what happened there, or how does that all come about, and what does the company do internally? Do they huddle every day? Do they create a task team? And how does those things get dealt with?
Well, Disney's an interesting one because they've been at the top of the reputation at RepTrak, looks at reputations, and they've been at the top for years. And part of the reason they were doing a lot of really, really good things about building their reputation. But then you get into some challenges. One, you get extremely diversified. So Disney was this thing, and then they're getting into television, and they're getting into sports, and they're expanding and their land grab for Disney has been pretty huge. And when you are making those kinds of mergers and acquisitions, you don't always acquire people that have the same values that you do, that have the same corporate structure that you do. You may have a creative organization that's now with a banking organization, and those cultures don't align. So you have a lot of those kinds of challenges when you're growing really, really rapidly. And then you have to also understand that your stakeholders are changing. And I think that's really what's kind of happened with Disney is stakeholders, and our stakeholders, if you look at them, you need to talk to them almost every day, because it's a roller coaster. We were in this whole, for lack of a better word, woke world where, you have to step out in corporate activism. You have to, if you don't, you're going to be, people are going to say, wait a minute, you're not doing what's right for the environment. You're not doing what's right for the people who work for you. You need to say things. You need to be an advocate. And our world has changed, and it changed over, a year, where we've said, wait a minute, we don't really care what corporates say. We don't want your opinion. We don't want to know what you're doing. We don't care what a CEO says. In reality, that's kind of right-sized itself in the fact that if you talk about things where your business can impact the world and is impacting the world, where you talk about things where it actually impacts you and impacts your people and your stakeholders, we allow you to do that. We say that's okay. We had a lot of corporations that were stepping out and talking about things that didn't impact them, didn't impact their stakeholders, and in some cases they said things that didn't align to where their stakeholders thought they should be. And because they weren't listening, they didn't understand what their stakeholders expected of them. And that's how you get in a lot of trouble. Lawsuits, there's always going to be lawsuits.
Sure.
We're about to live in a huge world of lawsuits. As we've seen in the last week with the Trump administration alone. But as we look at misinformation and disinformation and security and all the things that are happening around AI, we're going to have a lot of lawsuits. So we've got to kind of be prepared for that.
Yeah, yeah. I was also going to ask you real quick before Johnny chimes in. I don't know if you're keeping track of this public debate related to this movie with the Moldoni and whatever actress, and it seems like with social media and recordings and people are no longer wanting to trial things in the courtrooms. People are trialing things in social media, and so I'm wondering, what kind of organization or efforts do brands put into this, and how many people are chasing or watching what's being said on TikTok or in Instagram about them, or how much of that is that increasing? Is that kind of people sort of pay attention to it? Is it fundamental to why they make decisions? What's your thoughts? What's your comments?
Has to be fundamental today. And I think a lot of brands have not been paying attention. They've monitored social media as it has to do with their brand. They've not looked at the dark web. They've not looked at forums. They've not looked deeply at where the reputational risks are. And as we're going into an AI world where there's misinformation and disinformation out there, brands have to monitor, and they have to step up and say, that's wrong. The information is wrong, and they have to fight, and they have to fight in a legal battle in a way that we may not have done before, because privacy and misinformation is eroding the trust of the brand. And then it's interesting to me, we talk about how much time we need to spend on AI and making sure that the information that we use on AI is correct, et cetera. But we've not used that same ethical rigor with looking at influencers, with looking at TikTok, with looking at social media, and we have to begin to do that as well. We've been all up in arms about AI, but influencers on TikTok and Instagram, et cetera, X, have been throwing out misinformation about our brands, and we are just now beginning to fight for that at the same level that we started to fight for it over the AI side.
Yeah, Johnny?
But for years and years, social scientists, sociologists have looked at the trust in American institutions. So I'm gonna break it down, the question, in two ways. Matter of fact, I pulled up the data here, and this is how people trust the institutions that make it through their everyday life. So at the top has always been small business. Everybody trusts a small business. And the military everybody trusts the military. That is, if you get lost in an airport, and you see a military person there, would you go over there and say, hey, can you help me out? I mean, that's the kind of trust. 43% for the police, which has dropped some. The medical system, only 34%. Organized religion, only 32%. And it goes all the way down. So my first question is, as I look at the research on trust, those are the major institutions. The second step, what you're doing, we used to call corporate citizenship, and we measured that by not necessarily trust. It was how much the firm gave to the community to do well. For example, when I was playing baseball in Southern Louisiana, I might have on the back of my baseball jersey, presented to you by, by A Bear Bowling Company, right? And all the little league teams had, Andreas Carvalho Business Enterprise on their uniforms, and we kind of equated that with trust. With the internet, however, where everybody is a business, right? Everybody can put out things. Let's start with the second one. What's the impact of the internet on corporate responsibility, which I think is related to corporate trust? That is, I don't see them as two separate things. I see corporate responsibility, and that is how firms enhance their community. So, for example, you look at Austin, we have lots of enterprises here, but it's Dell who did Dell Computers. Other companies came here just for the labor, right? Because he's one of us, right? So how has that impacted? First of all, the internet has impacted corporate citizenship, which I think relates to corporate trust.
Well, I think it's a vehicle for telling a story. It's also an opportunity to lose your narrative to others telling your story. And then you go digitally beyond the internet and look at all the different voices that have lended themselves to determine whether they're going to be for or against your brand. And so there's a huge opportunity to utilize those tools to build trust. There's a huge risk for others to take the narrative when you don't, to erode your trust. And there's no hiding. There's no hiding. I mean, if you look at, even when I first started my career, if there was an athlete that got in trouble, there weren't a ton of cameras, video cameras filming it, right?
Are you trying to say I would have been in jail if I had social media in college? What are you saying?
Most likely.
But now, if there's a bar brawl or somebody's a little drunk or whatever, and they're a celebrity, somebody's got a phone out. If you're the CEO of a company and you're talking to your employees just offhand, somebody's got a phone out looking and videoing you. So there's no hiding anymore. And that's a good thing. But there's also this misconception of transparency. And so, depending on what age you are, your idea of transparency is so different. If every piece of my life is on TikTok, then I'm an open book and I feel like everything should be on TikTok, right? So that's where I believe transparency is. When you are a CEO and you understand that there's corporate, there's laws governing what you do, there's corporate secrets for your differentiation, there's all these things. Just because you don't say everything doesn't mean you're not being transparent. But there's this thinking of what is transparency and a need to define it. And the other thing is that corporate citizenship no longer is the only thing that we're looking at for reputation. It used to be when that was it. So if you got a crisis, let's do some good corporate citizenship, and that'll buy our way out of it, as you will. Show we're doing good. Or what I always thought is, let's just do good, so when we have a crisis,
Mhm.
We've got a little brand equity there. We've got a little trust. So we're drawing down a little bit because people say generally it's a good company. They just had a misstep. Now we're looking at reputation from, your products and services. You're not even in the reputation game if your products and services don't work, if they're not good. Don't even talk to me about reputation if your software doesn't work. But now we're also looking at innovation at the workplace. How are you treating your employees? We're looking at your governance, your ethics, how are you conducting yourself? Then we're looking at citizenship, which is that corporate citizenship of how we're engaged in our communities. We're looking at leadership, and we're looking at financial performance. And all of those things are coming into reputation. So because we now have view into all of them.
Right.
Right, because this is the way I think about it. You're exactly right. So I would tell my students, all right, you got a job interview, everybody dressed well. I hope you were not throwing up on YouTube. Drunk and throwing up. Let's say that I wanted to buy a new car. I would ask my neighbors, hey, what do you think about the reputation of this thing? But now I just go to the internet and I can really write a program that said, give me the sum total of all the opinions, negative and positive, about John Butler's business reputation. I can do that now.
Right.
And so I think what has happened is, what I find very, very interesting, when you talk about everything from medication to buying an automobile to buying insurance, that they themselves have sort of their own definition of reputation, and they just go to the internet and say, look, shall I buy this insurance? And that happened to us in the automobile industry. If you can remember, you're probably too young to remember. But we're saying that General Motors advertised their way, right, to a great, great success. Then all of a sudden, somebody came up and said, hey, I'm going to create something just like television so that individuals can rate the cars themselves after 6 months. After those ratings came out, advertising meant nothing. So I think the reputation now, as the way everybody think about it, and this is why I like your firm, is the sum total of what they feel, of what they see. Well, yours is the sum total of everything that's happening around them.
Right.
So what I do is, if I want to buy something, if I want to buy a new guitar, I go to YouTube, I listen to what people say about it. If I want to join a firm, I go to everything. And products, it's all over there. It's very, very difficult. And of course, if you want a very, very bad professor, you can also to the internet now. And not to mention your field of sports, it is all out there. So let us say that I have a big firm and I'm having trouble. I mean, I am woke. I'm talking about everything. My employees, I'm talking about everything in the world. Everybody has an opinion. And I'm just out there, right? I come see you. So how do you repair that? How do you take all of the data pieces on the internet and try to repair that reputation? So it's a practical kind of question. I want to hire you because look, I've said everything, right? And right now my sales are plummeting. My reputation is going south, but I got a good company. What do you do for me?
Ooh, well, that's a good one. And it's not just, well, first of all, we're going to kind of see what that reputation is, and we're going to measure that reputation. We're
It
going to
was
look
great. It was great until I ran into my high school sweetheart in New Orleans. And then somebody had a camera and all with the hell in a handbasket.
That's right.
Well, we really look at reputation in several areas. One,
Okay.
How are you communicating? What's the culture, and how are you aligned in the culture? How are you connecting with your stakeholders? And how are you prepared to change in a changing environment?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really kind of we call it a living brand when you're doing those things. And then we insulate it. We insulate it with reputational risk assessments, with listening, with crisis planning, et cetera. And so when we're working with an organization as a matter of course, we're working on all of that all the time to build equity in the reputation, and then to be prepared for when there is a crisis or a misstep. When we're called in for what we call reputation recovery planning, you've had a crisis, you've had a situation. We, first of all, really dig down to understand where the break is. And we look at those 7 dimensions. So is the break in leadership? Is it that you have misspoken? Is it that you've had bad performance years? Is it a little bit of everything? And so then we'll put together a plan. And a lot of times it has to do with the breaks were misalignment with the culture, or you had leadership that was trying to pull an organization at a level that everybody wasn't ready to go. You may have had unionization. Everybody's trying to unionize, and the leadership and the board said some things that weren't appropriate over that scenario. You may have had a product that killed somebody, and all of that's on the internet, right? And so where those stories are, where they're lying, how do we change the narrative? How do we talk about the narrative? How do we truly listen and understand what the stakeholders want, what they expect? How do we recommunicate? We build the culture and prepare for change, because there will have to be change. And a lot of times, if the CEO has misstepped, we're hired by the board.
Yeah.
And
it relates to the bottom line. I mean,
right, it relates to the bottom line.
Okay.
And the value you lose value overnight. You lose customers overnight. And sometimes it's, you have to get legal involved because it's someone that's had a bad experience, or there's someone who's just trying to attack your brand. And you have to have a plan for that, because there's a lot of people out there that just want to attack your brand. They had a bad experience. You didn't give them a discount that you should have given them. You didn't reimburse them or something like that. And so they decide because they have a voice, they decide to move forward and attack you. And you have to defend that.
Yeah, I stand alert. So when that happens to a firm and the stock drops, I go buy it all. So, and let me just say one more thing related to that in terms of how we study organizations. I study organizations, whether it's the military or business organizations. There's something lurking in the data these days. And that lurking is this. I don't necessarily want to go to the best reputation when I come to Austin. Barbecue place. I want the grittiest hole in the wall that you can find in Austin. Don't send me to the brand names. I don't want to go live in the Marriott. I get this all the time, being a New Orleans boy. I don't want to live in the Marriott in New Orleans. I want to live in a French Quarters hotel nobody knows about, was built in 1700s. It got 6 rooms in it with no reputation. So one of the things I've said when I look at the correlation data is that everything sort of contains the seeds of its opposites in terms of how we think about the world. So what do you think about people saying, okay, why are you worrying about the big companies with reputations? Let us seek out a startup, a firm that would have a better reputation. But more importantly, I'm not interested in going to the big name restaurants in Austin. I want to go to Dirty's. I'm not interested in going to the barbecue place. I want to go to another place. I'm not interested in going to Popeyes. I want to go to just a mom pop cooking down where everything is greasy. That's happening also. It's happening in music. People are going back to violence. So how do you think about that when it comes to reputations? When people are looking for stuff and they don't choose you?
what's the reputation that you want to have?
Yeah.
And when we do a reputation platform for an organization, we say, what do you want everyone to say about you?
Mm-hmm.
You know, in a perfect world, how would someone refer me?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's the reputation you're going for. And that's what we're working on is if this is the reputation you would like to have in a perfect world.
Mhm.
So, you know, same thing for me. I'm planning a trip to Napa. Love wine. I don't want to go to the wine that I can buy at Total Wine and More.
Right.
I want to go to a small winery that has a story, that the winemaker is probably going to be the person to give me the tour. That's where I want to go. If I wanted to go to the big guys, I just go buy a couple of bottles at Total Wine and More and do my own tasting.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's looking at, those places have, when you look at their stories, they have a reputation in mind, and they're not trying to compete with the big guys. They're trying to differentiate themselves, and we look at it almost from a blue ocean strategy perspective
Mhm.
of how can we get out of this, red waters and be something different, be our own thing, be our own niche. And how do we tell people that that's who we are and feel very comfortable that that's who we are, so that that's where when people are looking for that, because everybody isn't looking to stay at the Marriott. A nice little Airbnb would be wonderful. But we have to tell that story that we want to be known for. And that's really, really important, and it's something that startups have a problem with. Startups have a tendency to try to be competitive with the big guys and
Mm-hmm.
try to take away market share with the big guys immediately, but they try to do it by being the same. And in
Okay.
reality, they don't have to be the same. In fact, they need to show differentiation. There are certain things that I call table stakes. Let's have the table stakes there, so that when I look at you, oh, you're going to provide me with all of the basics, but now I'm looking at how we're different and what those
Mhm.
differentiations are. And that's how, you have people like, you have organizations that are able to do things very differently and capture market share that are startups and small, because
Mhm.
they're just telling a different story.
Okay. I've got one. You don't have to answer if you don't indict yourself, but the athletic stuff is really interesting to me. I do a lot of recruiting where I work at University of Texas at Austin and still do. And I have a speech that goes like this. Nowhere in the world, if you play football at the University of Texas, for example, will your name be spread around. You could not pay a firm to spread your name around the world and America like the University of Texas can. But in saying that, you have a reputation to uphold. And I say that because I work with UT folks, I work with LSU people, Well, all of a sudden, something happens to them, right? And the university say, well, nope, we've done all the training. It's not our fault, right? So what do you do when an athlete comes to you, not a CEO, an athlete comes to you, and you said you started in athletics. You don't have to name any names, but I've been there before. I'm there now. What do you do to prepare my reputation when I'm making 50 million a year and all of a sudden something happens? What do you do with a grinder who all of a sudden, Baylor player, who was coming back to America and was busted, right? I mean, how do you deal with that? I'm sure you get a lot of that.
Well, the first thing is you've got to want to change. You've got to want to
Yeah.
make a change. And you've got to show and it has to do with what's your brand. I mean, we have a lot of athletes that have a edgy brand. And well, first of all, it's not the same as college athletics. It's not the same when I work there,
Oh no,
because
where did you work?
I worked at Ole Miss.
Oh, that
And
ain't good.
I know you said LSU. We're gonna have to.
I mean, you just that ain't good. But I know I mean that's just not good.
And so, well, I went to school at North Carolina. So, and I
No,
started
that's okay.
started
I
at
know
North
Ole Miss. I
Carolina.
mean, that was that. Yeah. And a matter
Yeah.
of fact, we were playing Texas playing Ole Miss tonight. I know the coach. I know the former governor. I know the people who worked in athletics there. I
Yeah.
know because I was on the board at LSU. But go ahead.
Great
Yeah.
place, great place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, when I was there, you represented the university, and we worked a lot on representing the university.
Yeah.
I started a crisis and media relations management course for the student athletes, to prepare them to deal with media, et cetera. And that was because they were representing the university.
Mm-hmm.
Now the athletes are representing the university, but they're also representing themselves. They're their own brands.
Mhm.
We used to not have that until they were on the NFL or NBA side of things. And now
Mm-hmm.
they have their own brands. And a real challenge for universities is to get those brands to align with the university.
Mhm.
And that's something that I think over the next year to 2 years we'll see a lot of is as NIL continues, and learns its way, as the transfer portal kind of learns its way. I think we'll begin to see we're I call it a messy period. We're in a
Oh
messy
yeah.
period of change right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to work itself out. I think we're going to find the right path. It may take us 3 to 5 years, but during this period of time, you still play for me. You still play for my university. You still have my university's name on your back.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything you do is a representation of that, whether you believe that or not as an individual athlete may or may not be the
Yeah. I
case.
think it's a huge problem. Yes.
And so I think we're gonna have a little messy period here to where we align to that, and I think there'll be leaders, like the University of Texas will be a leader in this path,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll be able to do some things that bring that along. But it's also in helping the student athletes with their brands, and
Mm-hmm.
and one of the things that once you get a little money, the amount of people that surround you and want a little piece of that money gets pretty huge.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so the and some of those people are excellent in guiding
Mm-hmm.
and give you a really good path. Some of those people aren't.
Right.
And so for the universities to be able to guide that process, for there to be registrations through the NCAA of people who will be good for the athletes. And maybe that's where we are. We had this registration of agents for years. But we've got to figure this out. And because right now, it doesn't do anyone good, not the university, not the individual athletes, when they're polar opposite of each
Yeah.
other. I
Mhm.
mean,
I
I mean,
think we
we've
need to
got the
talk about.
situation right now with Jimmy Butler. Now that's a pro world, that's pro, but you can look at what's going on with Jimmy Butler right now, and the Heat's doing what they can do by just suspending him,
Yeah.
right? But when you're still talking about college age kids, and I've got one of them. I mean, my son's a junior in college, so I know exactly where their mindset is.
Yeah.
And there is some guidance there. And when they do get in trouble and they do misstep, they need guidance to get back on track because they lose money. If I have a sponsor, and I misstep, I lose that sponsor. And
Mhm.
we know that in the corporate world, we know that, but a 22-year-old doesn't know that, hasn't experienced that. So it hurts you when you have missteps and you're on the internet. It hurts you when you go get drafted.
Mhm.
When I was at Ole Miss, before draft, we would have former FBI agents investigating the athletes
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know.
because the teams that wanted to draft them did not want to take a risk on them, if there was something hidden underneath. And
Absolutely.
now that's all out there in the open. As I
Mhm.
said earlier, you can't hide. There's no real place to hide right now. It's all out in the open.
Well,
So
this is
there's
how bad it is, and we need to do a program. How bad it is. People are saying, "Look, you're getting paid. All right, we got the best stadium in the world at Texas. That means nothing. We got the best. We got the best mentoring. That means nothing. It's all about the money now. All right, so we're not
Mhm.
responsible for them anymore. That's one side of it. The other side, which is my good friend Nick Saban's side, is they're still college students. They have to go through that, and that's what you have. Did you know Ashley? Did you work with Ashley, a good LSU Tiger, when you were at Ole Miss?
uh-huh.
Okay, we won't talk about that's my girl. Did you know Ronnie Musgrove?
Yes,
Well, he's a
yes.
good friend. I talked to him last night, former mayor of governor of Mississippi. So
Mhm.
my point is that I think right now it's like the individual CEOs, right? It's like the individual athletes, right? It's like the individual person who works for a company. And I think that's what gets in trouble. I don't think necessarily it's the big firm anymore. I think it's what people say. I spoke at Rice University about a month ago to some management professors from the big schools, MIT and et cetera. And they were so politically correct. they didn't want they didn't want to do the research because they didn't want to make anybody feel bad. And they also thought that the firm is responsible for you. That's new. They didn't even talk about the bottom line. So we talked about sexual harassment. I said, well, you're a researcher. They might love each other. It might be the love rather than just the power. Power might be available. It might be just fall in love, right? So I think that what I really like is that the internet has made it an individual thing. And firms will tell you, I'm going to give you the training. If you do it, it's on you. The same thing is happening in athletics. Before, the firm was responsible. Now, I measure that. People used to say, you ask somebody, what do you work? The average person would say, well, I'm an accountant. If you ask somebody from IBM, what do you work? They say, I'm from IBM. They never tell you what they do. Right. All right. You're a
Nobody got
professor.
fired for hiring IBM.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, it's really interesting, but and the repair, I think, is the repair becomes very interesting to me because it happens every day. And when people go into a firm, they know that they can lose everything by their reputation. And we see that every day, whether it's in corporate America, or as president of the United States, whether it's in the military, wherever it is, for the things that they have to repair themselves uh, because of what they've done. Good stuff. So we're gonna talk about athletics because I get all the calls all the time. And remember, I brought you to Austin, so
Yes.
I brought you and your husband to Austin, right? Yes.
So Bonnie, I'm curious. So, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, social media was just, looming. People were thinking about, doing something on Twitter or whatever. It's kind of gone from, a thing that we must pay attention to, perhaps the new game in town. How much of that, the digital world versus the rest of the traditional methods, how much of that has shifted and is the tail wagging the dog or is the tail now the new dog?
I think it's a temporary situation. I think social media is controlling things right now, and individual influencers are controlling things. But I think that's about to shift, and I think AI is going to be part of that. Influencers are not going to be humans anymore; they're going to be AI agents. And so they're going to unseat because it'll just be quicker and faster for me to go to an AI agent to go plan my trip versus asking someone, watching 12 videos on TikTok, as you will. That's going to take a little time to change, but it is going to change. Also, as we've got more and more misinformation out there, it's a great opportunity for the traditional media outlets to not try to compete in the, I think what happened with the traditional media outlets is we tried to compete with the fast pace of social media.
Mm-hmm.
And now traditional media outlets have an opportunity to be the facts, to
Mhm.
be to have a to look at it as a blue ocean strategy and think of themselves as a difference, as a different place. But you can see that they're not quite there yet because CNN just laid off a lot of their reporters to move even more in the digital space because
Mhm.
they're still trying to compete with that social media piece of
Mhm.
things.
Mhm.
From a PR perspective, you know, if you're trying to pitch your corporation, do you pitch to, you know, CNN or Wall Street Journal, or do you pitch to 50 different micro influencers
Mhm.
that actually have the audience for you? That's still
Right.
going on, but in the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be a huge shift there because of AI, and AI agents are going to take over a piece of that. And we're already
Mhm.
seeing that, like, you know, companies like Kayak, which you used to go to Kayak and compare all of your flights,
Mhm.
they're saying they're losing business because people are just looking at that AI agent on Google and asking a question, their question's been answered and they're moving on.
Right.
So we're going to have a shift. It's not there yet, but we are going to have a shift.
Mhm. Interesting. Interesting. Now, I'm curious about something else, Bonnie. How many times or how many conversations or exercises perhaps you've been part of where somebody tried to put a value, a monetary value on the reputation as part of the brand value? Is there such a thing? So if I'm Nike, Coca-Cola, Microsoft, how much, I think that there's some studies around the brand value, but the brand value covers reputation as well. How much is reputation versus anything else?
I look at brand value and reputation value together, and RepTrak does some numbers there of what percentage you're more likely to work for an organization that has a high reputation value, how much more likely you are to buy from them, etc. We see that the wall, you know, on the street for organizations that are actually traded, higher reputation means higher money. You can look at all of that. I look at it very much in reputational risk area as well, especially if you're in a merger and an acquisition, you're looking to acquire.
Mm-hmm.
There is an added intangible value for both your brand and your reputation that can increase or decrease the value you're wanting to pay for something. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times we help organizations kind of work on that before
Mm-hmm.
either before they're purchased, to prepare for the acquisition, or on the other side of things, when you are the acquirer, to make sure you're not making a mistake in who you're buying.
Right, right. Interesting. Johnny, any final thoughts?
Well, I think it's very interesting because we really haven't solved this is what we haven't solved on the web. We haven't solved the trust issue on the web. Uh, whether it's interacting on the web with people that you don't know, we just have not solved that issue. We have not solved the click issue, and that is if I have a website and I have 1 million clicks, but only 5 people buy, that's a problem. And we have not, and we're moving toward solving the problem of individuals and the reputation of firms in the digital world. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that Bonnie is right on the cutting edge of things. And I think that it's very, very good to have, because as we know, when something like this happened, it was very, very easy before. You just do a television commercial, right? But right now, I have an opinion, you have an opinion. Everybody has an opinion. So the question is, who do you trust? That's the
Mm-hmm.
question. So I like it.
Yeah. Bonnie, before we go, tell us real quick what's in front of you the next 6 months. Any conferences, anything you can share about what's keeping you busy the next 6 months?
Well, I'm in the middle of writing a book about AI in a reputation world.
Oh, wow.
And I mean, reputation in an AI world. I'll get that right in a
Yeah,
minute.
yeah, yeah.
I'm also doing a lot of work and research around responsible AI implementation, and we've created a change management model for organizations. And I'm leading a global symposium on AI, responsible AI implementation in Italy in May. So I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to that.
Cool, very cool. Well, it's always a pleasure to, digress a little bit into some of the soft skills about how the world is changing. And, a lot of people, in the corporate world take this reputation management seriously. I think more and more the awareness and the reality that you have to be thoughtful. I remember telling my kids a long time ago, be careful what you put on Facebook and wherever is going to come and hunt you later. So it's only gotten more challenging, I would say. And there's really nowhere to hide. And I think the biggest challenge is the third party associations, the people around you, that if they get in trouble, that eventually may impact you as well. So anyway, I look forward to reading your book and keeping in touch. And thank you for being here today. And Johnny, take us away.
Barney, I had to dig deep for this one. Archie who, Archie, you a tiger bait. Archie who, said at LSU. Now Archie Manning was a man that we all knew, 'cause he had made the last 2 years long for LSU. But deep and down in Tiger Stadium, what did we see? Archie, the Tiger was waiting for you. Archie tried to run that ball right, tried to run it left, and every time he passed that ball, there was nothing left. So Archie who, you a Tiger bait. That's what we said down south, Baton Rouge that night.
Now, don't be singing that for Arch now.
Now I want you to know that I did, when we recruited his grandson, I took Archie to lunch and to dinner over at a friend's house, and he remembered every play of the 67 one, but none of the 68. So they beat us. They beat us up in Ole Miss and it knocked us off the national championship. Then we beat them 67-13 the next day. He said, I don't even remember that game. we have his grandson here, and he's going to be good.
Right.
Be
Right. Good. Arch is very good for sure.
Yeah, okay. All right.
So his father, when I was at Ole Miss, his father Cooper was there.
Oh, yeah.
Was at Ole Miss. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Well.
Well, thank you guys.
Okay. You
And
take
all the
care.
best.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you for being with us. Take care.